Okay, so here's our May meeting, bringing us all together, and we've been keeping these pretty regular for, I think 6 months straight, almost 7, yeah, about 6 months straight, which is a pretty good streak. So with today's meeting, we're going to focus on an update on the global XRSI initiatives and kind of some updates and progress there that Kavya will cover. And then kind of based on that, we'll have a discussion on, the topics we're all familiar with the medical XR use cases, and go through an exercise of thinking about how each of us and how the council can support those topical needs. So where are our subject matter expertise in terms of the use cases? Where do we have the know-how to address the risks and opportunities? So that will be probably like a good 30-40 minute discussion, in some ways similar to how we went through that clustering around what initiatives we want to actively work on. So it may feel like a little bit of overlap, but you'll see how it's after Kavya gives the updates, how it's distinct in a way, going from kind of internal towards external services. All right. Kavya, would you like to take on the next steps?
Sure. Thank you, Julia. And thanks everyone who made time for this meeting today. And for those who would watch it online, really appreciate your commitment throughout the years, as well as, today. Banu, I don't know if you prepared this, sort of added the slide that I wanted to, if you could move to that. Right. So the big announcement for Medical XR Council today that comes from the XRSI board, and I encourage everyone taking part here that this is embargoed till May 31st. This big announcement is that we are rebranding. And it's not that much of a rebrand. It's a part of a long-term strategy. So this is the first milestone where May 31st or June 1st, AWE, we're going to be announcing XRSI's new logo. And also, strategically, we want to really hone in on our human intelligence network, and hence the caption, Human Intelligence in the Loop. The other changes, we have been, X-Reality Safety Initiative. About 4 or 5 years ago, an initiative made a lot of sense, which has now become a sort of a global movement with us, at a global level. XRSI is currently advising over 60 governments. We are sitting with several of the UN folks, without going too much into it, but like business groups of human rights, etc. We are helping develop standards with ITU. We are working together with Interpol. We're also working together with WEF. They're constantly asking for our advice on various different things, especially when it comes to privacy safety. We had been part of MDIC for a while, but I was quite underwhelmed with that group, not for their work, but just the approach to privacy and safety. And I still see a massive gap that we continue to fill from the medical perspective. And all of this could not have happened without this brilliant network of human intelligence. And as the time progresses, so to buy into this strategy, you really have to imagine about 5 years from now, the world is really driven and also fueled, our immersive contents are fueled by artificial intelligence. And at that point, this network of intelligence will be seen as sacred. And not just seen as sacred, because we really need the people, not just the people who understand, oh, here is some MIT nerds who know what the risks are, but we want to claim ourselves as the people who truly care. And so this is kind of like the starting point of, explanation. Like if somebody asks about us and that human well-being, that's the Medical XR Council's of course, all of it like safety, privacy, security, but human well-being is essentially a decision of around this technology that could not possibly be made without the council's input, advice, etc., and alongside, regulatory governance, etc. So by placing emphasis on human intelligence, we want to bring this sort of a network of leaders, etc. And as I go around, and I was just mentioning earlier, I'm headed to OECD, which is like a organization, 38 countries are part of that organization. They are going to have a closed door discussions with us about what is the impact on various economies, technologies, and so we're now being part of such elite groups. Like last year I was at NATO, and we were advising Ukraine on cyber defense during a war. So this is very, very encouraging, but also really compels us to pivot, to prepare for what is coming. And this is the preparation. What this means for the council is we are going to now, this is a milestone, and then in the future, what we anticipate to do, the frameworks that we develop, the expertise that we have, we would really focus on that, such as, I'll just pick an example. I say Divya Chandler. She has tremendous expertise. There are several use cases that she can, I'll just take for one example, neuro rights or neurotechnologies, or the impact of it, advising various governments and the United Nations, what should those really become at the granular level. And the truth is, she actually is, literally, and we are gladly able to sort of provide that navigation, but obviously Divya doesn't need that. Divya has been doing this forever. So what we want to do is we want to highlight those expertise individually as well as organizationally. So over time, when people come to us, we can literally kind of solicit and make it even more paid solicitation, and solicit the advisory from the experts. It has been so kind of you that so far you have graciously, humbly shared this knowledge, but I believe that our collective knowledge must be paid. So that's also one of the goals over time, is that we equip ourselves in a position that we really pay for any minutes, hour that we solicit from you. And that's like a long-term strategy, and we'll work towards it. And so that's pretty much it. I would love to hear any immediate reaction or any concerns or questions that might arise from this.
Yeah, you can just unmute and speak up as you please.
I think it's fantastic. I fully support it. It's a great move. Really, really smart move.
I love it as well. I think it's wonderful, Kavya. So I think it's going to, it's unfortunate. You've got such wonderful elite people, just like even the people on this call who I have such deep and immense respect for. They all have other jobs. So this is actually going to help to probably, fund XRSI's impact, because people's time is valuable. So yeah, I think it's a great move.
Fantastic. And that's really encouraging to hear. Anyone else? I know a few of you are on the road, but please feel free to email your feedback. And please also keep in mind, some people who, like thieves are gonna think this is about stealing or something. Some people might, and I'm not a person who cares about any too much of a criticism. I don't care. People would be jealous, people would be envious, people would say, oh, now look at her, she's jumping on money. But we're not OpenAI. We're not jumping on money. We really care about this thing, and we thought deeply about it, and this is the way to go. People would not care about things that they don't pay for. This has been established. So we actually consulted with 20+ advisors. So if somebody comes up to you and say, oh, look at XRSI pivoting to make money. No, we are pivoting to really protect the welfare of individuals and society in a way that is effective. That's the pivot. And also the rise of a lot of these snake oil AI stuff that's going to dilute the true human intelligence. So we're just kind of placing ourselves as a precursor and a network that any government can seek out. And then there's long-term strategy that, we're still working on. It would be disclosed over time as to how this becomes a go-to-market, what are the MVPs, etc. So please don't be deterred by anybody who says things like that, because I've heard them, and I don't care, because in my heart I know who we are. This is literally just trying to protect the soul of that care towards humanity, but also getting paid for what we deserve to get paid for. Right.
Yeah, and
Julia, over to you.
And I would add on, this is also about sustaining the organization, and working for grants that pop up, or donations here and there. It's taxing on the group to only rely on that. But like Kavya said, we have a set of expertise that are sought after. And so if that becomes part of how we operationally support this group, as individuals and as an organization, then our impact will be able to be greater. And that's kind of the lens I see it through. And I've actually seen several nonprofits transition to public benefit corporations or to for-profits, not because they want the profit, but the funding structures don't allow them to reach their mission when they're constrained by that organizational identity. So yeah, that would be my 2 cents to add to this.
Oh, just quickly, Julia, if I could also add, we are also looking for trusted partners. So by default, anyone that we work with within the council, any network that we work with, you're welcome to submit yourself as the trusted partner, because you as a representative of that organization, so we would literally have your logos as the trusted partners. And when inquiries come, which could be outside of our scope of work, we would literally direct them to our trusted partners and collaborate with our trusted partners who are doing the work. So this is not just a individual, but also an organizational collaboration. So the network extends to your organization that you may be representing or you're part of.
Right. So we would add Santa Clara University to that, and then having input from our Applied Ethics Center and so on would be part of that network. And that group is actually very eager to contribute to these initiatives. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I think it's a really wise move, especially the point regarding AI's sort of inevitable mixture with extended reality as it is in its current form. Although, they're already kind of interwoven, but I think really in the near future, and I guess speaking in metaphors, if AI is the brains, then XR is the muscle by which some of these potent methodologies of doing things will be implemented. And so I think it's a very wise thing to position in this way ahead of time, because I agree. I think I'm very concerned about implementations that combine AI and XR, and the potential implications for a variety of different things related to safety. So I think positioning wise, I think it's smart.
Thank you, Joe. And okay, so, and Joe, if you guys recall last session, he presented and he'll be joining the group, and is really excited to be contributing to these projects. Okay, we can go next slide. Okay, so based on that, as this gets queued up, we're going to pull out our trusty murals to facilitate the discussion. And do we still have the outline that was there, Banu, on the other slide? The one, there was a slide for it, right, on the deck? After the link. Yeah, number 3, please. Yeah. Okay. So the way we're gonna go through the this like sorting exercise is with these key headings of use cases and risks. And these are pulled from a couple different resources that we link to on the document we shared with the meeting agenda. And hopefully you've had a chance to look them over, but we'll go over them again now as well, so it's fresh in our memories. And there are more than these 6, but we've narrowed it down to these 6 use cases as they're the most relevant to they're the most relevant to the risk issues, right? So where there really are those intersections between the applications of XR technologies and where we have the highest degree of risk. So the 6 topics we're going to be talking about are immersive education, the use of XR in diagnostics and clinical decision-making and planning, VR, XR in therapeutic applications. Many of you guys are builders of that, and that crosses both the VR and AR. So that is a very broad category. The use of virtual worlds for telemedicine and remote collaboration between physicians. That's another important bin that's emerging. Simulation and training kind of set as a distinct category from immersive education, whereas the simulation and training are, as Jared will be able to expand on, is looking at how in a pointed way you're recreating things that happen in the physical world in the virtual environments, and having a bridge of training those skills there, whether they be the skills of decision making in high stress environments or the manual skills, the technical skills, whereas like immersive education would be having your entire educational environment in a virtual space. And then on the patient empowerment and engagement, this has more to do with the using VR, AR for patient education on like if the examples, one of the emerging examples is like House Call VR House Call VR. And so they provide educational content for management of chronic conditions in a VR environment, so that the level of engagement and the translation of complex topics are in a more are delivered in an immersive way, in a hopefully more memorable way. So that would kind of be the 6th bin in ways we're thinking about the use cases and where our expertise may connect. And then on the flip side of that, we have kind of the key risks, and I know you guys are very familiar with all of them. So I don't have to reiterate data privacy and security and where that's amplified with XR and AI. Also looking at this through the lens of kind of the medical ethical principles that need to be applied in the use of that type of data. Kind of on the third side, the acceptance and validation from both the perspective of system providers and patients of these new technologies, and then the cost and access, accessibility of design in terms of different perceptions and abilities. We have that bin. And so next, the cost and infrastructure. So what needs to be set up in terms of the computing support, the network support, and operational support to implement these things in care systems. The healthcare training. So one of the things we're working on is how to educate the providers. So whether that be the nurses, the medical assistants, the physicians, or so on, and within this loop. And then the questions around how is all of this implemented and regulated in kind of our last bin. And so thinking about now kind of where you may connect with one of those or a handful of those, and it could provide some wisdom on that from experience, from study, and so on. That's kind of what we'll move into with this exercise. Do you have any questions? I'm checking the chat just to be sure. Okay, all right. So I think with that, we can move on to the mural tab.
Julia, I just had a quick question about whether there would be, I should have brought it up sooner, just time for me to review something that might be relevant to this group, not to the mural exercise. But before we conclude, would I have a chance to share something over from XPRIZE at the very end?
Sure thing. Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much. Thank you.
Like about 5 minutes?
Excuse me?
How much time would you like?
Oh, yeah, 5 minutes, plenty. Yeah.
All right. So then we'll pause at about 9:50 or so. Okay. All right. So Vanajit has put together the mural with our pictures and everything. It's quite a treat. So thank you. All right. Is that large enough for everyone to see?
Yep.
I'm on a smaller screen, so it's a little bit harder. And if you're on your phones, it might just be hopeless. We'll definitely say everything out loud to support that. Okay, so here we go. Do we have everyone who's here? Just double checking. We should add an extra box for Catherine and Joe. We also have them on the call, and we have Jared's on here. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we would, okay, let's do that really quick. And while that's happening, we can have that quiet thinking time of where you kind of see that your own alignment. Right. Almost there. Okay, awesome. I'm going to start using this tool with my student teams because we end up having to do so much of our brainstorming and creative work by Zoom now, and I need some help with that. I think this will help us. Okay. Why don't you let me know when you're ready.
We are ready, Julia. So,
okay, all right.
Yes.
Okay, so what we'll do is with the boxes we have below, we'll move copies of our pictures to those bins for easy sorting. Okay. All right. So the first was immersive education, right? Bin number 1.
And Julia, could you just for clarity's sake, just to paraphrase and correct me if I'm wrong, but basically the differentiation between immersive education and simulation training is essentially immersive education is more of you go to XR for more of a, for your sort of typical instruction as opposed to a simulation per se. Is that accurate.
Right, that's my understanding. Kavya, would you describe it differently?
Honestly, I would rely on Richard and probably even Jared in terms of like, do they see it sort of do they see it sort of different, or is it part of the same?
I see it as different. I see immersive learning. I don't know. I can see it in one of two ways, right? So simulation could be immersive learning because we're immersing people in a simulated environment. But I oftentimes think of VR and XR taking the place of your screen-based types of learning and your screen immersive learnings. And so it may be more of a web-based immersive or head-worn device immersive versus the AR world in which we're placing something on top of a mannequin to help people understand, the rotational maneuvers of a fetus or something along those lines. So I think they can be separate categories. I think a little bit of a definition and distinction is necessary, but I do kind of see them as separate categories.
I also leaned on Divya's one of the keynotes or the talks that she gave a couple of years ago at XR Safety Week. And if you see the GDoc, there was a bit of explanation within these categories that goes along with it.
Yeah.
But I actually leaned on Divya's expertise and a couple of other resources to outline that with little of my brain to input there.
Yeah, and then Catherine is asking about the interventional treatment, so the integration of AR into surgical practice, and for that augmentation, for these purposes, we're putting that in the therapeutics bin. So the therapeutics would be the
Surgical guidance.
yeah, the active use of XR tech in practice. Different from like the diagnostics, which would be kind of the measurement and monitoring and clinical decision making.
Yeah, that's consistent with the regulatory schema as well. I mean, they're very much approaching it as a, something that would go through a therapeutic pipeline.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Okay, and then all right, and then Richard asked, thinking real examples, 360 videos immersive. So guides on HoloLens would be a simulation. I think we're saying, I think both of those would go into the simulations. I'm seeing like the immersive education more as like the examples I've seen here more as the platform. So yeah, but there is overlap, and probably if you have expertise in one, you probably have expertise in the other, as they are adjacent or embedded within one another. Okay, all right, so let's keep this going because we have really like 20 minutes. So if we can do like a hand raise on Zoom, if you'd like to add yourself to the immersive education. And we'll do one pass through like this first. All right, Divya.
So just quickly, Julia, I would add myself to it. However, I would also caveat there that, the only aspect that I can contribute to is the privacy, safety, security stuff of it.
Okay.
And that's it. So maybe I'll just kind of make a note somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. So education at the intersection of privacy. Maybe we should have used a graphing method for this. Okay, and then we'll add Divya and Jared, would we add you to this one or only on the simulation and training?
No, I think here and the simulation training.
Okay. All right, got it. Anyone else? Okay, all right. Got it. Okay, got all of those. Fantastic, hands down. And then diagnostics, kind of clinical decision support, monitoring.
That's definitely square within, I think, that and therapeutics and remote care. I do have a question about patient empowerment and engagement, because what do we mean there? Because I feel like, patient empowerment and engagement, you want engaging things that have therapeutic value. And you also, and patients are also empowered through, accessible, affordable, scalable diagnostics or screening tests and so forth. So
Okay, so
that's another disambiguation.
Okay, so on the list here, one was the education aspect, the health communication. The other would be on the wellness side, so personalized health and
Okay.
wellness, and reduction of anxiety and so on through education and distraction techniques and so on. The other things we can deliver through VR. So all of those are falling under that bin.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then just to offer one sort of thing, is it correct, and maybe Jared can help, is it correct to say that simulation and training, I mean, based on what I've heard, it seems like that's really more of the bodily kinesthetic, sort of sets of tasks that actually involve like physical tasks and learning those things. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but.
Yeah, I think I think simulation is in my mind, but I think there needs to be a differentiator. I don't know if we clearly have reached definitions of this, but the simulation component is really whether it's mannequin based or part task trainer based, it is that kinesthetic component that I think is missing from that immersive learning component. There is a gray area. I work with a group that is doing active shooter training, and they are utilizing a backpack worn VR device in a 200 by 200 square foot play area with airsoft weapons, which allows you to move through a space but be in the virtual world. So there's a little bit of an overlap there, right? That's definitely simulation, and it's also definitely immersive learning. But in the healthcare field, I don't think we're doing much of that overlay as much. So I see the immersive learning piece. What we found it useful for is really for the knowledge criteria and the basic skill acquisition or basic knowledge criteria, whereas the simulation component is really about the kinesthetic and putting those pieces together.
Can I just say something about simulation?
Sure thing.
So I'm an anesthesiologist, and I've been doing simulation since I started. In fact, our field in medicine has been simulating probably the longest, for over 40 years. And we've been doing it kind of like pilots, because things are, they're going well, and all of a sudden it's like, you have to make an emergency landing and the patient's life's at risk, and you may have anywhere from 30 to 90 seconds to respond before they die. There is a very, very strong cognitive component of simulation and training. And the first step of that is actually to recognize what's going wrong, and then to take all the successive actions. So in my world, just like with pilots, simulation is as much about the cognitive skills as it is about the sort of physical involvement, whether it's, doing CPR on the mannequin or pushing certain drugs or intubating or whatever it's going to be. Different from immersive education, because you can even imagine, let's take the same group of people, I don't know, med students or residents, and you can put them in worlds where all of their medical training may come in a completely immersive manner, like for instance, to learn things about, pediatric heart defects. They may be able to actually wander through a 3D version of a heart. There is something like that at Stanford. And so obviously that's very cognitive, but I wouldn't say that there's no cognitive component to simulation and training. In fact, the cognitive is actually what sets off the entire chain reaction of a series of events. So they have overlap, but I wouldn't make them so distinct that one's very physical and one is very mental. So that was just
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Divya, I agree. I guess just to, and I don't mean to pigeonhole on this too much, but to put a finer point to it, it's almost like it's more akin to type 1 thinking, really. I mean, for example, if I go in the hospital at 3 a.m, and there's a stat C-section, and I need to basically, I've been up all day or whatever, it's not exactly a lot of deep critical thinking. It's muscle memory and, but there is a cognitive component. I see what you're saying and I agree. But I do think that it's largely centered. I mean, the distinction to me seems largely sort of cognitive didactic type things, and more type 2 thinking, and then the simulation and training space being, more lower level thought, if you will, and bodily kinesthetic type skill sets.
All right. So I think we've got that cleared up, and we can move on to the next bins, because I do want to make sure we touch base on all of them before we have to close out. So Charles and sorry, it was supposed to be Charles and Joe to diagnostics. I think you both raised your hand on that. Anyone else on the diagnostics bin? Okay. And we
Yeah.
can always update
I
later.
added I just added, I'm adding myself to the ones that are,
Okay.
that have relevance.
All right.
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing. I'm just trying to get
Okay.
into the mural.
So everyone has access to it. Okay. How about on the therapeutic side? I would add my actually, I think based on what I'm doing, I would add myself on, based on most recent experience, this simulation and training and the patient engagement. That's where I'd put myself. So I'll do that really quick for myself, or I'll do that afterwards. And then Sarah, may we add you to patient engagement? Is she still here? I think she dropped off. And then Charles, you're raising your hand right now. Is that to add to a particular one?
Yeah, I also do therapeutics.
Okay, all right. Do you want therapeutics? Ryan.
Yeah, I'd go on patient engagement, diagnostics, and if there was any kind of research or data collection, it'd be there, but I don't think there is one like that. So
Okay. Well,
but
that might
telehealth
be
is
more
one.
relevant on the risk side. Okay. And then Catherine, is there one you would like to be aligned with? You got that moving already? Okay, I see. All right, so maybe we'll just take one more minute to kind of sort that out. It's a lot of people stirring the soup at the moment. I'm having a hard time keeping track. Okay, where did that one go? Oh, I seem to have lost it in the mix again. Okay, so we're settling in. Okay. All right. Oh my God, moved already. Okay, great. Okay, so we're looking at kind of the distribution here. So we do have some representation in all the categories, which is great to see. Before we move on to risks, is there anything else on here you would like to add, or any other comments on how we define things?
Just quickly, I think, Julia, what do you think about clinical trials being separated from simulation and training?
Wait, clinical trials is inside simulation and training?
Yeah,
Oh, that's not.
right.
shouldn't
So
be
I
there.
would say clinical trials is
That's something
is
totally
an
different.
entirely use case by itself, within
is,
which
yeah.
you could have various different things.
Yeah, that does, I'm not sure why that's in there.
Yeah, and I
That's
also
definitely a
added
whole
a
different thing.
category 7 based on the call out from Ryan,
Mhm.
in terms of like research, data
Mhm.
analytics for medical XR use cases.
Okay,
Um,
yeah, that would go there.
and I would also ask if there are any other use cases that are like very prominent. Just, full disclosure, we are also trying to turn this into a white paper that would be published on our website with your headshots, expertise, and bio, so people actually know. It would be done over time, and we would also love to gather consent on organizations doing this specific work. And Jared, I'm looking to you if there are organizations that, like simulation sort of kind of organization, the training organization, or if they wanted to become part and add to this sort of expertise, that would be awesome too.
I would suggest a category, if I could, just that I think is important, is integration between VR healthcare as an industry and the industry at large. So like where health concerns will come into gaming environments and things and regular commercial uses, like, what kind of health data can we collect, or how can we hurt people in a game that should be, weighed in on by some kind of regulatory oversight with healthcare with our expertise. So it'd be sort of a category of integration in commercial products or in consumer products.
But wouldn't that be kind of use case by use case basis, and it's just more of a process than a use case itself, Ryan? Like, let's say somebody recognizes there is a need for telemedicine, then you essentially, the expertise would come in and do the process instead of making it an entire independent use case that every time there is an integration, because you do have to then bifurcate what kind of integration is it, what is the particular use case, and we already have those categories of use case.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in a sense, but I do think that the idea of engaging with gaming companies who wouldn't normally engage with us, and they wouldn't understand any of these other use cases, but they have a pretty solid requirement to protect people in their experiences and make sure that, and that's where I think our expertise as a collective could be easily hired on and applied to all kinds of like areas that aren't, inside a healthcare silo sort of thing. So people that will want to come from outside to engage with us who aren't in healthcare, I guess, might be the better way to put it.
Yeah, so then that would go in the stakeholder categories, which we could also, kind of do. Just like, like I'm saying, hey, I'm only here for privacy, safety, security, but I'm not going to ask for a special category for it because it's sort of a process. And then cybersecurity industry should definitely talk to medical XR, but it is a stakeholder and not, again, a use case or a category. Does that make sense? So I would say both of you, your input are totally valid, but I would say, rather than making it a use case, we should put it as a more process and a stakeholder and consider that as our expertise that we could kind of provide based on use case by use case.
Sure, yeah. However we integrate it, I think that's great. I just didn't see it here. So I think that's a perfectly reasonable way to go about it.
Charles, your hand is up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
It
just
shouldn't
left up?
be.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I know it's unintuitive to lower the hand with an extra button press. Okay, that's all right. Just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something. Banajit, do we have boxes for the risks on the mural?
No, Julia, I can
Okay.
quickly create them. It will just take a minute.
We can also, yeah, if that can be done, done quickly. But one of the other things that, I kind of wanted to go through here was that other list, because, we know the use cases, we have our experience there, but when we're thinking about moving towards those advisory services, we also each have that expertise in understanding those risks. So like how, Kavya said, the data privacy aspect is where she shines, right? Charles, as our resident bioethicist, we put you on the ethical analysis of something, right? Kind of following that logic. So that's why I wanted to make sure we kind of ran through those as well. So and I'll just start writing it down to the side here as Banaji is creating the template. On the data privacy and security, would there be, who else would kind of put themselves in that category of having that expertise there in that with the intersection with healthcare?
And I wonder, Julia, if it would be so, because thinking of the risk as a bucket, and we have only 7 buckets then, versus like maybe we ask everyone to, hey, what all possible risks could you think of for this particular use case? Or is it all universal for medical XR? I'm just trying to figure out like what approach should we be taking as we think about the risks. Is that use case by use case, or should we take like a universal risk bucket? It's just a choice that I wonder what's best to do for this white.
Yeah, I think, I'm sorry, I think that's a really good point. And I think it's going to be a combination. I think there's going to be sort of a standard slate of risks that you're always going to look for, particularly diversity, equity, and inclusion risks. And then I think that there's going to be some that are very specific to the application. And then I also think there has to be room for the unknown and unpredictable risks. How do you audit for things that you can't predict?
Okay. So yeah, the known unknowns, is that the term of how we model for that, how we predict for that? I'm not sure. Yeah, Charles, I see what you're saying, where the data privacy and security, that's going to show up in different forms across all of these, whereas like acceptance and validation, it's different in each one, right? So what that looks like when it's patient facing versus hospital systems accepting a new therapeutic or so on, that's another layer, or a different training technique. Those are all a kind of acceptance and validation in terms of concepts. But I think we can still, I think it's really just a weighting across these different categories of the use cases. In some way or another, they all have these inherent risks that need to be considered. It's just more or less in one or the other. That's how I would put it. So we can.
I was just going to say, looking at the list of use cases, like the risk list there, and cross-referencing that with the use cases, I do think that list does in some way, shape, or form apply to all of those use cases. I can't come up with a use case where one of those risks is completely not applicable.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying as well. So yeah, I would say, just if there's a particular aspect of these 7 risks that you feel you have a strong experience on, then we would want to make sure that we have that documented. And we might not be able to get through it right now, but we all have access to this mural afterwards. So once the boxes are up, we can just move, take the 2 seconds it takes to move our name to the right box. We could do that. I think that would be the best use of the time. And so I think we can hand it over to Divya about for the announcements for the XR prize.
Yeah. So last week I was just at the X Prize in Los Angeles, and we were ideating about a healthcare X Prize. There was also another group doing society and leadership, and there was a lot of stuff focused on education. And so essentially everything that had been suggested, a lot of the prizes that are being ideated on are things like remote healthcare, telemedicine, AR, VR, you name it, things that we deal with. So one thing is I think we've lost a lot of people, but I wanted to put it out to the group, maybe the larger medical XR community, to see if people want to compete for any of the prizes as they are, as they're designed, because we will be voting on them after we fully design them. They're actually worth quite a lot of money. And the second is, I would mention things like we have prize criteria. And one of them is things like, democratizing the technology based on cost or the kinds of materials used. So for every prize, I introduced the idea of building in privacy and safety standards. But everybody's like, oh, that sounds great. But nobody understands how to specifically incorporate those standards into a prize design. And so I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could take sort of some of the principles that we're just more generally developing in our privacy and safety framework or medical XR as, say, some kind of a checklist that if you're going to win this prize, you need to incorporate these standards into your final design. And so that's the only thing I was going to say. That does not need to be answered today. I'm going to continue to work on prize ideation, and then in November we're all going down to build out the full prizes. But almost all the prizes could do with a bit of some sort of privacy and safety standards. And so I'm just wondering if we as a group might have something that we can use for exactly this kind of use case that, in kind of adjacent spaces. So anyway, I just thought I would throw that out there. And also, at some point, make a formal announcement to the group to invite them to apply for some of the prizes.
Julia, sorry, you're muted.
Okay, what is the timeline for that? You said it'll be like November, so?
So we're not gonna be, do you mean for the prizes themselves or for the
Like
actual?
if someone's going to apply, like right now you're designing the.
Yeah, so that's not gonna be
category.
for quite a while. So,
Okay, all right.
the announcement of those is not as
Mhm.
important. Maybe though, over the next like 1 to 2 months, it would be wonderful to talk about the privacy and safety
Mhm.
standards, because I'd like to actually incorporate those as part of the prize and say, hey, look, there's a body out there that does this kind of standardization. And if you want to win a prize, you need to adhere to these standards. So that would be a sooner ask, on the order of several months.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be an extensive list. It can be just, a first pass at the kinds of things that we want them to achieve. Much as if you're going to apply to the FDA, to have your medical device approved, you need to also meet these certain regulatory standards that also
Mhm.
include cyber safety. So just something to throw out there.
So I'm sure Kavya, there's something to work from the PSF on that regard. But also looking at on the digital examples from digital health as an analog, you have the DTAC guide as well. But then I would also take a look at the OneMind cyber guide, which is for mental health applications, and they have a what they call a transparency rating on all of the applications they review. And so they have a checklist of questions of how the app uses the data, because they're using sensitive information. And so they'll score it they score it as questionable or unacceptable, questionable, and acceptable. But that might be another starting point on how on
That sounds wonderful, actually. Do you have a link to some of these things? That'd be great.
I can provide you with the OneMind one. I'll send it on Slack. Yeah. But the OneMind one, it's the origins of it are from our academics. So like, it's from the impartiality of not like a consumer report sort of thing, but if you're going to be designing something on the consumer space to treat mental health, let's provide some sort of way for people to more objectively evaluate what's there, and to have expert reviews on top of that
And just so you know, mental health was a huge focus of this group. So, yeah. So thanks for that. And for anybody who's just interested in XPRIZE, you can just kind of go check it out and see what they have.
Julia,
Mhm.
sounds like
Joe, you're breaking up.
you're just saying is really, if you can hear me, apologize if you can't.
Mhm.
Oh.
Okay, I can hear you now. Joe?
I'll text it in the
Okay,
chat.
all right, okay, thank you. Yeah, but okay, this was a good productive meeting and I will see some of you guys at AWE. It will be an intense few days and we'll make our announcements. It'll be fun. We're at booth 948. Did I memorize it correctly? Yeah, okay, all right. We'll see. Oh, we forgot to say we're not doing a June meeting, right? Yeah. So the other thing was this will be, we'll take a summer break before doing our regular monthly meetings. We will continue with the working group meetings. Janet will be on board again to working on the research study because she's defending next week, so she needs to stay focused on that. But after that, we'll pick up that working group as well, and we'll continue on with the patient safety and hopefully getting some input from Ann Lord Bailey from VA on that topic as well. So those are our other quick updates. Thanks everyone. Have a wonderful Friday and Memorial Day weekend if you're here stateside. So, all right. Bye guys.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Julia. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.